Hi everyone, this is Kellie Nightlinger with Wild Woman Outdoors and Life Force Radio. And today I want to talk about how food is medicine. Hippocrates was famous for saying food is medicine. So first of all, I'm on my rebounder today because I'm boosting my lymphatic drainage, which helps detoxify, and I'm also moving all of my mucus in my body a little bit as well. So that's why I'm on my rebounder. And so I'm going to be talking today, and you can also follow along with me as far as wild plants at wildwomanoutdoors.com. And this video is made for Life Force Radio. So we have trillions of microbes in our body, and they outnumber our human cells 10 to 1. And also inside of our body, naturally, we have a virome, which means we are a host of a multitude of viruses. We're a host for bacteria. We're a host for yeasts and parasites. And so a while back, we probably heard of the Human Genome Project. And they thought that was going to change a lot of things. And of course, it has helped some things as far as medicine and health. But the outcome was unexpected. There were around 100,000 genes discovered in the Human Genome Project. And yet we have trillions of microbes alone in our body. And so we're more bugs than we are genes. And so I was on antibiotics from the age of about 2 to 3 years old, from ear infections all the way to 38, until I took control of my own health and my own life. And I and my family were subscribers to allopathic medicine, which is great if you're in need of ER treatment or chronic accident like a car crash or some other life-threatening chronic or immediate emergency that needs to be taken care of. And they're excellent at those things. I'm not discrediting that, but they're, in my opinion, not very good at nutrition, not very good at learning nutrition and realizing that food is medicine. And so they're very often only limited to 5 or 10 minutes spent with the patient, maybe 5 minutes examining the chart, and then maybe 5 minutes prescribing a drug, a pill for every ill. And that's what happened to me. And so I had 4 or 5 courses of antibiotics every year pretty much of my life, because I actually had a food allergy that was unrecognized. And I used to say as I got older, why do I get sinus infections chronically? Why do I have these migraines that make me vomit? And I had a reduced quality of life. And the doctor would just say, it's could be genetic, could be really anything. And they really gave me no idea of what to do. And at 38, I became chronically ill, life-threatening situation due to overuse of antibiotics, due to the prescription, the pill for every ill method by the doctors. And also because of my standard American diet I was consuming. So I take responsibility for it as well. But I was ignorant, and I was trying to save a lot of money in my 20s. I started a youth camp called Angels Among Us Youth Camp for kids that had lost a parent, or they had been abused, or they had been in foster care. And it was the pride and joy of my life. So I saved money on food because I wanted to be able to improve my youth camp and give the kids better opportunity. And so I consumed primarily a manufactured cereal with milk for breakfast in my 20s and early 30s, not realizing that I was allergic to gluten all those years and milk. And then for lunch I might have a PBJ, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, which has almost zero nutritional value now that I'm smarter. And then for dinner, I would just have a couple things of ramen noodles and maybe occasionally make something in the crock pot that was more healthy. And so I was eating primarily processed foods. And so I take responsibility for my ill health too, because now that I'm wiser, I realize that my food choices were also causing me to be diseased and be nearly dead at 38 years old. Actually, so it was a combination of that and having a weak immune system from too much antibiotic use. So now I want to talk about how food healed me and how food can help your overall health as well. So I was told that, a lot of things in my life that I had experienced were genetic. Well, actually, they're epigenetic, which means our food influences our genes. Our food is influencing our gene expression. So you normally can't change your genes, unless, of course, maybe you had a stem cell transplant or other kind of transplant. But generally speaking, you're kind of set with your genes. And what you don't realize, probably, if you've only ever went to an allopathic doctor, is that you can actually change the expression of those genes. So they actually have done studies on twins, and they studied different environmental situations, including food, that twins were given, and they had different disease outcomes based on that and overall health. And so yeah, I was fat, sick, and diseased and nearly dead and didn't know where to turn. I had a blood infection coursing through my body, and it was all over everywhere, and I had chronic fatigue. And basically, my metabolism was shutting down. My cells were no longer working properly. And I turned to ancestral wisdom, and now I add in modern science to synthesize that information to help myself heal my body, and I'm still in that process. So I can talk in a different video about what I specifically did to heal, but right now I just want to talk about overall food and how it can help you. And it's full of phytochemicals and polyphenols. And so this world is symbiotic. We need everything in this world to work in balance to have it run the most efficiently. For example, let's just talk about how glaciers are formed and how they help the overall planet. And then I'll talk about how we have similarities because our bodies are actually symbiotic as well. And so we are also nature. So we need all living things to, and even non-living things on this earth to have everything run efficiently. So warm, moist air comes in from the ocean, and it rises up the steepest coastal mountains. We're going to use Alaska as an example. And it causes that moisture to condense in the steepest coastal mountains in the world. And it creates rain, snow, fog, 2 out of 3 days in that largest temperate rainforest in the world, which extends down from Kodiak Island, Alaska to Northern California. And that temperate rainforest creates a very rainy ecosystem on the seaside of that coastal mountain range and other mountain ranges in the region. But just inland from that, that same moisture condenses and rises and forms into a lot of snow. So where at sea level you might get 60 to 90 inches of snow annually, just a 5-minute helicopter ride or maybe 5 miles inland, you get over 100 feet of snow annually, and that condenses down to dense fern, and that is an ice field. And the ice field is pulled down by gravity, and it creates U-shaped valleys called fjords, and it's carving out, well, they're fjords when they're full of seawater anyway, and it creates glaciers. And that glacial runoff flows to the ocean, and it's hyperoxygenated and very cold. And so it helps to provide a good habitat for the largest wild production of Pacific salmon in the world. And those salmon spawn once and die. And when they die, they're providing valuable nutrients for that temperate rainforest to thrive. And it's a perpetual fertilization system because they're actually isotopes in the salmon of all of the tops of all of the trees in the temperate rainforest. So those salmon actually fertilize everything that's green, and what overflows flows to the ocean is pulled down by gravity in those deep U-shaped valleys that are carved out by those glaciers. And also with that is glacial silt that deposits, and it settles down in the bottom of the ocean. And what happens is the humpback whales and other whales from around the world, and fish and other aquatic vertebrates, and just fish and everything down to small things like zooplankton, animal plankton, they actually are mixing the ocean. And so those ocean mixers mix more of the ocean than the wave action on the shoreline. And that causes the sediment that would normally settle to be evenly suspended in the water column. And then the sunlight penetrates that water column as the days lengthen in the spring. And that creates the photosynthesis to occur in those minerals that are now evenly suspended in the water column. And a simple way to describe it, I'm not a scientist, but a citizen scientist, is that photosynthesis is allowed to create little single-celled organisms, and it helps bacteria thrive. And the single-celled organisms are diatoms, and they eventually create phytoplankton, which is plant plankton. And that plant plankton is fed on by zooplankton, animal plankton. And they're microscopic organisms. If you take just a teaspoon of water, there would be countless, innumerable microscopic phytoplankton and zooplankton in the water, and some are large enough that you can actually see. And so that is how the ocean then in turn has species in it that are living and thriving. And so everything in the ocean either eats something that eats phytoplankton or eats phytoplankton themselves. So that is how the circle of life is created, and that allows for the salmon to be so healthy because they have a great food source. And I'm just using the salmon as an example. And then also the oxygenation from the glacier runoff helps make the ocean very healthy, and fish thrive where there's the proper oxygen content and nutrient content, and then they return to spawn once and die and then fertilize the land. And so the circle of life continues. Well, in our human body, we also are nature. We have a symbiotic relationship with all things in our body as well. And so we are mostly gut bugs, or bugs in general. We have bacteria, yeast, viruses in our nasal passages and our sinus passages and our throat and our tube, or all of the different parts of our large intestine, small intestine, duodenum, and colon, and everything, and even on our skin. So we are bugs. And so when we eat, we can eat like a standard American and eat 160 pounds of wheat or processed flour every year, which causes inflammation, especially in the gut, because our gut is where 70% of our immune system lies, and we only have a one-cell walled thick intestine. And anytime we eat for just moments, the tight junctions in our intestines open up, especially when we have wheat. And it's normal in everyone, even if you don't notice any signs of it. But a normal, healthy person, after eating wheat, causes some inflammation, but immediately you probably wouldn't notice any kind of ill results, and those tight junctions then return somewhat. And so think of it maybe like if you were a kid and you were taking a spoonful of milk and then you spit it out through your teeth, how some of that would spill out in between, and that's what happens when you consume modern American wheat, which, for example, this isn't an anti-wheat video, but I'm just using this as an example. It allows for some of that inflammation and the food particles to enter the bloodstream. So we have white blood cells right on the outside of that single cell intestinal wall. And they're waiting there in case there's any kind of contaminants. And then when you consume something that your body is allergic to, see, our wheat is not our ancestors' wheat. It has more gliadin in it now than ever before. And in countries where they don't allow genetic modification of foods, often people that have a very strong allergic reaction to American wheat can go to other countries and actually consume wheat products and not notice any ill effects. And that's because our wheat here has been genetically modified, and we also have to consider that our American wheat is non-organic. Wheat is treated with desiccants, which are primarily Roundup, and that also destroys the cellular metabolism and ability for our cells to function properly in our body. And so whether you're eating wheat or just other foods that might be inflammatory, then you might experience any kind of irritable bowel syndrome or other situations that might be more severe. But 70% of our immune system comes from our gut. And so if you're not eating for overall gut health, then you're not having optimal body function, and you won't probably notice some of the ill effects maybe until you're a little bit older. But one out of three American adults over the age of 40 suffers a chronic disease, and 70% of Americans are overweight. And so we're consuming, on average, in the standard American diet, 160 pounds of wheat or flour, processed things like pizza crust with flour, and on and on. And so basically, I suggest to eat on the outsides of the grocery aisles, grow a lot of your own food if you're able to, and think about your food, either each bite helping your body, healing it, or preventing disease, or causing disease. So with each and every bite, your food is programming your software in your body for disease or health. It's information. It's signaling molecules. And so, yeah, I suggest eating a diet mostly plants and using meat nose to tail and organic whenever possible. They're given antibiotics in the United States and growth hormones, and they're eating primarily corn, soy, and wheat food, which is not natural, and they're fed glyphosate food, which means that the desiccants are used on it for drying in a lot of cases, which is causing more inflammation in the animal, and it's not a natural food source unless they're grass-fed, free-ranging, organic animals that you're consuming. And you probably don't know, is it a feedlot animal or is it organic, free-ranging? And it won't be that free-ranging organic animal most likely unless it is actually written on the label, because it's easier for CAFOs or large commercial farming operations to jam in these animals in a close proximity and feed them corn, soy, or wheat, or a combination thereof. and they're fed or shot with a lot of antibiotics. So because they're not designed to be that close to one another, and so that's how they're avoiding them dying. And so also you could hunt and fish and trap for your food, and I do that, but I know you might have different perspectives on that, but at least I know where my food comes from. A lot of people are anti-hunting, fishing, and trapping, but as long as you're doing it sustainably and you aren't over-harvesting, then you're actually helping the overall health of that species, and you're in control of what you're feeding yourself and your family, and you're allowing that population, based on biologists' population studies, to have those species stay within the normal carrying capacity of the land. And you're not feeding them antibiotics, and they're not eating unnatural monocrops that are destroying our food system and our earth and dirt. Our ancestors farmed very differently, and today, with those 3 monocrops taking over most of the food production in the United States, and now in a lot of places in the world, it causes the dirt to be depleted of the natural microbes and fertilizers. So they have to add an unnatural fertilizer, and each year they have to add more quite often because the dirt that they're farming is more depleted. So if the government agencies responsible for overseeing our food production would just let us get back to a more natural, holistic way of allowing more free-range production of animals and allowing them to eat more naturally, it would actually heal the earth, and allowing more people to garden at their home and have community gardens and apartment balcony gardens and inside tower gardens inside of apartments if you live in an urban area. It would allow more of a natural food production where we could basically turn our yards into victory gardens and turn our small farms into multi-product, really healthy, vibrant food that's harvested organically. If we took all of the yards and all of the city properties that are basically grass and Roundup and fertilizer all over the United States and turned a portion of them every year into natural food production, it would not only heal the lands, and there would be enough food production for everybody, despite contrary popular belief that the only way we can feed this population is to put Roundup ready products in our bodies daily and fertilizer on all of the land. There might be some need for natural fertilizer, which we understand, but by practicing things like no-till farming methods, maybe at a smaller scale, and allowing big giant farms to farm more than just corn, soy, and wheat, and not having that regulated by the United States government and places like Monsanto suing farmers for doing the right thing, and they're not even allowed to plant seed that's not Roundup and not Monsanto-owned patents. How ridiculous. Native American ancestors, and even our ancestors, if we're not Native American and Native Indigenous people from around the world, would be in disbelief to find out that corporations patent food and put people in prison because they actually want to plant a seed that is not Monsanto or some of these other giant corporations that are not looking out for our best interests. So I just encourage you to eat real, whole food. Get back to making food for your family and having your family help you make that food, and showing some gratitude about how you got that food and how it was prepared, and sitting down at the table and enjoying a calming meal, a loving meal away from our devices, like our cell phones, and slowly eat that food while consuming, good healthy foods and waters, and having great conversation with those that you love in your home. And you will find it healing, whether it's in this time of crisis or at any other time. It's never too late to change your health, and you're not doomed by your genetics. I don't care if your allopathic doctor says, like they told me for basically 36 years, that I couldn't do anything about my sinus infections. I would curl up in a fetal position with a bucket next to the bed through my 20s and throw up with massive sinus infections and migraines. And my quality of life was nil. And come to find out, I was just allergic to milk. And how I found out was I actually went to PubMed, and I also went to some other sources, and I Googled the number one allergy causing sinus infections, and I found out that it was milk. So I stopped milk consumption for 3 days, which no doctor had ever told me to try. And for the first time in my life that I could recall, because before age 2, humans can pretty easily absorb and digest milk, and some people around the world have a milk allergy and some people don't. But in my case, I didn't know it, but I had a milk allergy, and I could breathe through my nose after 3 days for the first time. It was the first time my sinuses had drained in my entire life after having my first rounds of antibiotics at 3 years old and every year after, due to that milk allergy. So suddenly my quality of life went up, and now I've spent the rest of my life trying to build up my immune system that was destroyed by 3 to 4 courses of antibiotics and eating terrible standard American diet food because it was cheaper and it was easy to preserve and it was easy for me to make it. I realized that I love myself enough that I want to live with a longer longevity and more vitality and love and health, and garbage in, garbage out. What I put in my mouth either helps me or hurts me, and it's my choice. So I hope you found some benefit on this video, and I hope that you might consider your food choices a little differently, or maybe you're already on track and you can share your view of how food has helped or hurt your life to help others. So live, laugh, learn, and leave a legacy. And follow the river, follow the stream. For it will surpass your wildest dreams, and take no path but the one in your mind, and leave nothing but a wild legacy behind. So until next time, this is Kellie Nightlinger with Wild Woman Outdoors and Life Force Radio. And I wish you good health, love, and happiness. Thank you.